We have lots to discuss in today's video, including a new substantial rumor around Rasmus Dahlin. There's a rumor suggesting he wants out of Buffalo. We'll discuss where the rumor came from, what all was said. Plus, we're going to talk about the team and the players' reaction to this rumor and where it all could lead here down the road. Plus, we have some trade talk as well around the Pittsburgh Penguins, around the Seattle Kraken. We have some more inside information on what went down between Brad Marchand and the Boston Bruins on their negotiations, which ultimately led to a trade of the former Bruins captain. And we have a free agent prediction from an athletic writer that sees Sam Bennett heading back to play in Canada and the other team in Alberta that he has not played for before. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss here in today's video. A pretty substantial new rumor popping up today around Rasmus Dahlin, which we'll get into that here in just a few minutes. First up, last night we had a pretty major milestone. Avalanche player Nathan MacKinnon hit a significant milestone of 1,000 career points. Unfortunately, he had to do it on multiple occasions, and I'll explain in case you didn't see the game. I didn't see it happen live. I was watching a different game at the time, but when it happened, well, at least when we thought it happened, MacKinnon got an assist on a goal, which I believe was Natchez. The whole team rushed off the bench to celebrate the 1,000-point milestone, and then the Blackhawks challenged, and it was offside. And it was all for naught. MacKinnon later did get a point, picking up a multiple assist in the game to finally reach that. But it's kind of a funny scenario that you don't often see with a major milestone, a major celebration with the whole team on the ice, and then, oh, by the way, it didn't count. So, yes, but big milestone for MacKinnon, number 29 years old, first player from his draft class to hit that big milestone, and it's something a lot of players don't do. He's also, if I'm not mistaken, I believe he's the first player in NHL history to hit 900 career points and 1,000 career points in the same season. He's certainly one of the best in the world at the moment. I'm going to do, lots more great things, I'm sure, before it's all said and done. But what a great player Nathan MacKinnon has turned out to be, and already hitting 1,000 points, and he's not even 30 years old yet. Quick update as well in Ottawa before their game tonight on the road against the Philadelphia Flyers. We saw that they had recalled goaltender Levi Merilainen. Certainly caused a lot of short-term panic and stress within the Sens community and fan base. Obviously, last night they had they're on a back-to-back. They had the Red Wings last night, and they had one of the best performances you're going to see in a goalie from Linus Ullmark last night, saving 48 of 49 shots. It was crazy. Sens pulled off a 2-1 win. It was certainly one of those games where the team, they weren't horrible by any means, but it certainly wasn't their best effort. They were not playing as good as they would have liked. They gave up way too many shots, but it's a game where their goalie kind of, goalied the other team and stole one. So it kind of, Ullmark has been good lately. He's been on a good run. Team's been winning. They're slowly building themselves a little bit of a cushion to make the playoffs, and then you see a goalie call up and you kind of get concerned because you don't need any more injuries, but it's actually not about that. They actually wanted to be able to give Linus Ullmark the full day off. He's, I believe, stayed home for their quick one-game road trip. It was just a one-gamer to Philly, then they're back home. They play Boston at home on Thursday, so that way Ullmark did not have to back up. He's played, I believe he's played, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure he's played 8 games in a row. And then after last night on a back-to-back, he knew today he wasn't going to play. It was pretty much a given. But the fact he didn't even have to back up, he could stay home and rest, kind of like a load management type of deal, was perfect. Anton Forsberg got his first start in over a month. Sens picked up a 5-2 win over Philly, so it all worked out good. And Merilainen got another chance to come up to the NHL. He'll likely be sent back down to Belleville tomorrow. The Belleville team in the AHL doesn't play till Friday, so it was a pretty easy scenario for them to bring him up briefly just to give Ullmark a day off, which was, I think, a wise move. Now, on to a bunch of things around the NHL. Let's start first with a lot of the stuff we've heard around former Bruins captain Brad Marchand. Now, with all these scenarios between Marchand and Rantanen and everybody else, we're hearing a lot of what went on behind the scenes, and kind of uncovering some information on how things came to be the way that they are. According to some, Brad Marchand was offered a 3-year contract with pretty much what he's making now, with a small raise. I believe his AAV now is $6,125, and it was estimated to be around $6.3 million for 3 years. But apparently, according to these reports, that the asking price on the Marchand side was $7.5 million. He wanted a pretty substantial raise. And to be honest, I don't know. This is just my quick take on it, because you could make an argument at his age and his production going down that you probably can't really justify too much of an increase here based on that. But you could probably say that Marchand was probably grossly underpaid for a lot of years, and I think was probably looking for a bit of a raise here, just feeling like, he's given a lot to the organization, and like I said, was probably grossly underpaid for a number of years on that long-term contract, which certainly worked out quite nicely for the Bruins over the past 8 years. There's no doubt about that. So we know that we had heard, which we discussed before, that Marchand, before the deadline, probably within a couple of days ahead of time, wanted to have a meeting. He requested a meeting with Bruins management on his own to discuss the gap and to try to figure out a way to bridge the gap so that he could stay and re-sign and remain with the Boston Bruins, where he's played his entire 16-year career. So he essentially suggested that they meet in the middle. So he was looking for 7.5. They're looking for about 6.3 or so. So you're looking at just over $1 million gap. He said, let's just call it, go halfway and get this done. So it would have probably been around 6.8 to 6.9 range is what the contract would have been had the Bruins agreed to it, and they would not budge. They would not budge at all. So essentially, this happened over about $500,000. And if you think about the fact that they get a conditional pick that can become a first rounder that they're not even going to use for like another 3 years, and then you got to probably wait for that player for 2 to 3 years to develop to have any chance to be an impact player, you're probably looking at least, if everything goes really well with the pick, 5 years before you get any kind of regular games or impact on the organization from that selection. Is it really worth it over, moving on from your captain and completely changing things over here over that amount of money? Now, the Bruins have won a few games since the trade deadline. Clearly they needed some change. Maybe it's not all bad. I know Marchand was pretty emotional about his time there, but considering how these reports went down and the fact that he asked for all this, there's a lot of people think there's no chance he would go back as a UFA in the summertime, that Brad Marchand's likely going to be playing somewhere else. I suspect he probably won't stay in Florida just because they're going to have a tough time keeping everybody they have. It's, with the cap and everything, he's probably moving on. So he's going to be an interesting name to watch for sure in free agency. But interesting note there that the whole thing with the Bruins, basically the divorce happened over about $500,000. Kind of sad when you think about it. Also came across an article today from the Seattle Times looking at some further changes we could see from the Kraken during the offseason. Of course, we know they were a team that made a few moves here at the deadline. They made a couple of moves in season as well, which have worked out nicely, like the Capo Caco one, for example. That's worked out quite good. But they talked about further about some trades and trades and buyouts that we might see from this team. Clearly, Ron Francis and the organization has not been pleased how the last 2 years have gone. The first year didn't have high expectations. Second year, they exceeded expectations. They had everything go right. They had so many players hitting career highs. The scoring was insanely through the roof. Not sustainable at all, but they shouldn't have fallen back to the point where they've had 2 disastrous seasons where they're going to not only miss the playoffs, but miss it by a fair margin. So they definitely need to change things up moving forward. They've done a little bit of that. They've made a few moves here, but it's going to continue to the offseason as they continue to shake up that Kraken roster. One name that was mentioned as a potential trade bait still, there was a lot of talk around Jared McCann around the NHL trade deadline. Of course, the deal never came to be, but maybe teams were not willing to meet the asking prices. A lot of times, teams have conversations at the trade deadline, which kind of sets the tone for a move to happen later. I know listening to like Steve Stales, for example, the Ottawa Senators, he talked about how last year at the deadline is when they started having conversations with the Bruins around Linus Ullmark, and those conversations are what set things up to have that deal go down in the early part of the offseason. So it happens a lot. So certainly, McCann was a player that was known to have some degree of availability. Teams definitely checked in. Obviously, they were not willing to meet the high asking price, so he stayed put. But another player that's still expected to be revisited in the summertime. Obviously, another guy that they wondered about maybe selling high on would be Eeli Tolvanen. Not a given he gets moved, of course, but a younger player who's thrived in Seattle and has picked things up from where he left off before when he played for the Predators. And certainly a player that is, it's hard to say, right? Sometimes you have to sell high to get good value on a player in case, there's a chance to dip back down and lose value. It's all about managing assets, and it can be challenging, but it's been mentioned as a potential name there. Also talks about Philip Grubauer likely having a difficult time finding a trade for him, so that a buyout might become a real possibility for the Kraken goaltender. Now, we know that he's been through waivers. We know Joey Decord has become the de facto number one there. So certainly a name to watch. I don't know that a trade is really all that doable. Number of years now, under 900 save percentage. He really hasn't put together a solid year during his entire run with the Kraken. So I do suspect they're going to do everything they can to move on from the contract. It just might be really challenging to do so depending on, how the buyout could work, and, if there's a team out there that would be willing to budge at all, they retain some money. Like there's some options. Either way, they want to move on. There's no doubt about that. It's just a matter of how they go about it and where he ends up. Brian Rust is also another name to watch for this offseason. There's a latest article as well in The Athletic from Josh Yohe talking about how Brian Rust is going to be an interesting player. He doesn't have intel that the Penguins are going to be out there looking to sell and to trade the player, but obviously they're still retooling, still trying to find competitive window for their top stars. We know Erik Karlsson's a name that they are probably going to work harder on moving this summer, but Rust is another name too. And the reason for that it's suggested here that he's going to get a lot of interest is because he has a no-move clause that expires and goes away on July 1st. So that's going to make trading him a lot easier. We know that he's had a good run with the Penguins, been a good winger, played a lot with Crosby. So there's lots to like about Rust's game. A few years back when he signed his extension, there was a lot of talk he might be traded then. Never ended up happening. And, he's going to be a player now that's going to generate interest because there's definitely teams out there. The article mentions teams like the Red Wings as well as Columbus as teams that are, right now are probably wishing they had just a little bit more veteran presence and a veteran player who could help contribute more too. And so certainly somebody that is going to generate a buzz. He can see both of those teams going after, Rust and inquiring with the Penguins on his services. Again, no guarantee that he gets traded. Depends on what the offers turn out to be. But a player that likely is going to become coveted by a lot of teams in, that mushy middle that are looking for an extra veteran player to help them take the next step next year. Right now it's not locked in by any means, but we're seeing a team like Ottawa have a good trade deadline, trend towards making that playoffs. Columbus are still very much in the mix. They could fall out, but things are trending relatively well for them this year. And there's a few other teams in that mix there as well. So certainly don't be shocked to see Brian Rust generate a fair bit of attention. Another UFA to watch this summer is going to be Sam Bennett. Another Athletic article, this one from Alan Mitchell, who writes for the Edmonton Oilers, suggests that Bennett might be an Oiler target this offseason. Obviously, the connection to childhood friend and now Team Canada counterpart Connor McDavid. They had a great, fun tournament together with McDavid scoring a winning goal. Bennett obviously was a key contributor to their win, especially against the United States. So certainly it's going to be a tough time staying in Florida. They're going to have a lot of big, hard decisions to make. Players like Sam Bennett, Aaron Ekblad could find themselves on the move if they're looking for big money apiece. So certainly, makes sense that the Edmonton Oilers, if they can afford it, would have room and interest to take on a player of this magnitude. Like I said, not only the McDavid connection, but a player that the Oilers have played against, and they know firsthand how gritty he is, how sneakily good offensively he can be, and he could be a key contributor to the Oilers forward group, no doubt. Sam Bennett is going to be a player that I think we see cash in and probably have a fairly good long-term lucrative contract offer by more than one team this offseason. I pretty confident that's going to happen. Will the Oilers be one of them? Sure. I can see the Leafs being one of them as well, especially if they don't sign Marner. I think Bennett's going to have a ton of options. Wouldn't be surprised to see his new salary exceed $7.5–8 million. And going to tough to say what happened, but he could be a terrific addition to Edmonton if Alan Mitchell is indeed on to something. And of course, as we know, like I said, big rumor today around Rasmus Dahlin. Does he really want one of Buffalo? What was the rumor? Where did it come from? Let's get into that big story here today as well. So Spit and Chicklets podcast that came out today, of course, with Paul Bissonnette, Ryan Whitney, and others, Keith Yandel, talked about a variety of things today, but Biz had a scoop today that he shared that he probably knew was going to rile people up and certainly get a reaction regardless of what anybody thought of it. But with the Buffalo Sabres, having a big deadline day trade with the Ottawa Senators, sending Dylan Cousins to the Sens for Josh Norris. Of course, Dennis Gilbert was in that deal as well. It's not like they sold off Eichel and Reinhart. It's not the same thing because at least they're getting a fairly good player coming back, right? So it's basically two struggling centermen built a little bit different on how they play. They're physically a little bit different as well, but at the same time, a swap of underachieving centermen for two teams that have been struggling to get into the playoffs. Well, of course, Cousins is off to a hot start and helping the Sens win and get in, and where Norris probably feels like he's starting over in Buffalo after all that work in Ottawa to help them get where they are. Now he's back with a team that's at the bottom of the standings. So certainly, that's not great by any means. But of course, with the Sabres having such a tough year, I'm sure there's a lot of frustration there. And there's bound to be some players that are questioning their future. That's very normal, I would suspect. But according to Paul Bissonnette, Rasmus Dahlin recently had a meeting with Sabres management, Kevin Adams, and told him if things don't get turned around here soon, that he is going to want out and he will be a goner. So, Biz never cited any sources, and not that he needs to. He's a former player, turned analyst, turned podcaster, who obviously knows a lot of people around the league. I have, reason to believe that he would be given accurate info. Now, it doesn't mean everything is going to be perfectly accurate. There was some degree of refusal or whatever you want to call it to turn this down from Buffalo and Rasmus Dahlin's side of things. Dahlin did put out a statement later saying that ultimately it wasn't true. He went on to say here, I'll show you a little bit of context from Dahlin. He says, I don't know what he's talking about. I've never said I want out of here. I'm not happy with where we're at. I don't want to lose, but we have to get better. But I've never said I want out of here. I thought that was clear. Clearly it was not. Dahlin was the former first overall pick. We don't know, obviously, the sources here for Bissonnette, but we know, being former players and well-known media members now, that they definitely have a lot of people that talk to them, and I have no doubt that a lot of the info they're given is accurate. Now, is it all accurate? Probably not. Could always be exaggerated a little bit. Even if he ever did say this, he's not going to come out and admit it. There's no way. So, obviously, this is a big story. The player denies it. The team doesn't think it's true. But if something did transpire in a form of a meeting, even if it was somewhat unofficial, that's a big, big deal. We could be in a situation where in the not too distant future here that Rasmus Dahlin tells the Sabres, I want out, and he's gonna maybe refuse to deal with certain things in order to make things happen here. So obviously, when it comes to Dahlin, he's not gonna come, like I say, he's not gonna come out and say I want out of here, or yes, it's true. They're obviously changing a little bit in Buffalo right now. So Dahlin definitely came across as being a little frustrated with this report. But like I said, even if it was true or is true, I would not expect him to come out and say, yeah, that's right, I don't want to play here anymore. Obviously, Rasmus Dahlin would be a huge loss for the Buffalo Sabres. It would be a really, really tough deal for them to win. We already know that they've had other players leave, become cup champions like Eichel and Reinhart. So big reaction today on the Dahlin rumor. For now, obviously it's being denied internally between the player and the team, but you have to think that for him to have details the way he did, that there probably is something to this. I just would never expect the team or the player to come out and acknowledge that. Obviously, it's a sensitive topic. They don't want people to know if they have done something like that to ask for a trade. But it's a scenario for sure that I expect, a player like Dahlin to be frustrated. And, could it lead to a trade in the near future? It's very much a possibility. Your thoughts on this rumor. Do you think there's anything to it? I would never expect a player to confirm it, even if there was. But again, the Sabres have been through this. They've lost a lot of talent over the years. If you look at Ryan O'Reilly, Jack Eichel, Sam Reinhart, all have gone on to be Stanley Cup champions with other teams. And that's got to hurt, and it's got to cause them, obviously, a reason to panic and be careful with such a move. So let me know your thoughts on that trade and all the rest of today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.